Hello, welcome to Be Make Do, a Soul Makers podcast where we talk about what it takes to pursue your calling as an artist with spiritual wholeness and creative freedom. I'm your host, Lisa Smith, here with my producer, and I almost said co-host because that's really what it is for these conversations.
Yeah.
I'm here with Dan.
Hello, everyone.
Yay. And today we are talking about the prophetic critic. We are at the end of the list of our artist spiritual archetypes. Saving, I don't know if it's the best for last, but another wonderful one for last.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to talk about this one because it's actually one of the rarest types, like by far the rarest type. Certainly that kind of bore out in our quiz. We had the fewest people signed up or fewest people who ended up testing as the prophetic critic.
Right. I noticed that because we've had like several hundred people over the past few weeks take this quiz, and it's still they're out there, but it is the lowest number.
Yeah, it's the fewest. And another interesting tidbit is they would win the award for most likely to abandon the quiz. When asked to give your email address to get the results, they're like, no, I'm out of here. And it totally, when I saw that, I thought that was hilarious because it really perfectly fits with the prophetic critic kind of sensibility of like, don't put me in a box, don't make me do something. What are you going to do with that information? So it's just really hilarious that like even in taking the quiz, they're showing who they are. So it's really kind of cute, actually. But I'll say that, the prophetic critic is a big part of where Soul Makers came from, was the desire to reach out to find, equip, nurture, and raise up more prophetic critics who specifically are coming from a Christian perspective and are really, really good as artists and believing that they are important to our world, especially right now. So looking forward to talking about them.
Yeah. And if you haven't taken the quiz yet, be sure to do that at soulmakers.org/quiz, or just click on that link in our show notes. All right. Well, with that, let's get started.
Let's get started. Before we kind of dig into who the motivations of the prophetic critic, I want to clarify what I mean by the word prophet or prophetic, because that can get a little confusing. So a lot of times when you say the word prophet or prophetic, people think about somebody who like dreams or can predict the future or can speak into somebody's life in a supernatural way. And while that is certainly a part of some of what it means to be a prophet in the Bible, what's overarching about prophets in the Bible, about the prophetic sensibility, is somebody who has a really strong sense of the heart of God and what matters to God, what breaks God's heart, what God really desires and wills and wants for the world and for people is also on my heart. Like I can feel it as a prophetic critic. I feel it. It pains me. I want what God wants in the world. At the same time, I also feel for my fellow man, and I see the heartbreak and the hardships, and I see where people are not doing the things that God has laid out that are going to make us happy and fulfilled and have a good life and a connection with God. So to describe the prophetic critic, because it is kind of a complex archetype, I'm just going to read exactly what's on the website because it's well put. It says, your work holds a mirror up to reality to help others see things as they are and prompt people to action. The artist's prophetic critic attends to what's wrong in the present situation, relating the present to the past and the future. They're motivated by a belief in the power of art to transform lives and cultures and the possibility of creating something of enduring value. So the prophetic critic works hard to benefit a cause that they believe in. When they believe in something, they will do whatever it takes to try to push that forward. They have maybe a heightened sensitivity to the needs and the underlying currents of kind of what's going on in the world, usually before other people are even aware that it's happening. They're the first to see what's wrong and start to think of solutions to remedy it. And they're just compelled to make an impact, to make a positive impact on others through their artwork. That's the motivation, right? It's almost like you can't help it. They have this sense of urgency to speak and to act. And they do, I mean, they're incredible. They tend to be very self-disciplined and focused and able to devise unique solutions to complex problems and be extremely creative in the way that they engage people towards change. And artists who have worked in this way, who have that sensibility, and who do it well, can make incredible impact on not just individual lives, but on cultures in general, even creating movements. And I think about like the artists of the Harlem Renaissance. They were, musicians and visual artists and writers who were trying to present African American culture in a modern sensibility, in an urban sensibility of cosmopolitan, a new way of like, this is who we define ourselves as. This is how we want to present ourselves, and to explode creativity in a totally new way, which had impact in I guess it was the 1920s and that time, not only on particular cities in the US, not just American life, but European life. I mean, jazz traveled all over the world and had such an incredible impact on Europe and bringing kind of the world into the 20th century in this way. So that's just one example of how people who want to accomplish something specific in the world or in people's lives through their art, how significant that can really be. And these people, these prophetic critics, are so valuable for a culture. And I do believe that they are valuable for the church as well. And this is why it's so important that we can nurture and develop mature prophetic critics who are capable of doing things in ways that have meaningful impact, and not to just turn people away who are saying things that we don't want to hear, or we're not ready to hear, or we don't know what to do with. Because very often these can be a type of or a sensibility that's difficult within an institutional space, because it rocks the status quo and it requires change. And so that's difficult, I think, within maybe all the archetypes. This might be one of the most difficult for churches to understand how to support and encourage and disciple, but understanding why they're motivated to say these things can help us to figure out how to be able to encourage and support them, because they are necessary and they are important for our spiritual health as well.
Right. For me, I don't know too many of these currently in my life. I started to think about that looking at the quiz results of like, where are they all at? And I loved what you said about, it seems like they're out there, they're like hidden in plain sight almost, but also like, I wonder if sometimes it feels like there could be, working from that place, that motivation is a little harder due to how our culture is right now. I wonder, this is just me thinking about it, but I'm wondering like, where are they all at? Is it because of where our culture's at right now? Or or they're all there and they're about to rise up and we're about to see a ton of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I actually think there's been a rise in the popularity of the activist mentality, certainly in the last 5 years or so. And I think that that's true within the world of the church as well. But I think there are a lot of challenges for somebody who stands in this prophetic place within institutions. So they tend to get in trouble with institutions.
Like churches?
Like churches, right?
Right.
Because an institution, part of their job is to maintain the status quo, to keep things going, to keep the lights on, and there's a lot of concerns within that, things that have to be done to make that happen, which is important. But then it is also important to have the prophetic voice to say, okay, you say this thing, but are you living up to that thing? And I think that's a lot of what the prophetic voice does, is say, here's what we proclaim to believe and to want to be in the world, and here's the result, or here's the reality of how that's playing out. And that's not a message that anybody wants to hear. Right. I would not be all that crazy about you coming to me saying, Lisa, you say you're all about this thing, and yet I don't see that in your life at all. And I would say, well, I don't want to talk to you anymore right now, Dan. Go away.
Yeah.
That's human, right? So
Right.
it's a really necessary role, but it's also an uncomfortable one. And I think that I think artists who are prophetic critics usually are, again, if you're in a place where you're doing it well, you're really good at what you do, really good at artistry, spending a lot of time in prayer and discernment, and then really paying attention to how other people think, understanding your audience really, really well so that you know how to talk to them in a way that gets their attention, in a way that captures their heart, in a way that promotes action without alienating them and turning them off. And I would say in our culture right now, we have a plethora of people who don't care about the first part of that, who have something to say, who see what's wrong, but are maybe not as willing to take the time to really do the self-reflective work, the self-discipline work, the self-examination for self-hypocrisy, and really caring and being concerned about who you're trying to talk to, so you can talk to them in a way that, you can still get people's attention and even shock and even offend, but in a way that's going to lead to a constructive process of self-reflection or conversation and dialogue. Yeah, I think there are a lot of artists who are, you might think of them as activists, might be another way to think about them. People like Banksy or Ai Weiwei, Diego Rivera, a lot of visual artists, a lot of writers. You can think of even like Charles Dickens or Victor Hugo, people who were writing about the times that they lived in, trying to help people to see the injustices that were there, and through their writing, help people to have sympathy with different perspectives and make changes in the way that things were. People like Toni Morrison, Bono. I mean, Bono's a great example of a Christian artist who is, I would definitely say, falls within that prophetic critic. And again, we are talking about artists specifically. We're also getting into that earlier, like identifying actors and filmmakers and different people who are activists, and then they do art, but they're not focused on the message through their art. And that's with prophetic critics, we're talking about people who are using art because they believe so deeply and so powerfully in the power of art and what art can do. They're harnessing it to help people see things in a different way, to hold a mirror up to themselves, to kind of light a fire and motivate towards something good, toward a different way of being. So usually they are very self-motivated. They are able to act. They don't usually have a sense of like, oh gosh, should I, shouldn't I? It's more on the other end is where the challenges come, is working with other people sometimes, because they take what they're doing so seriously.
Right.
And it's so important that they can become frustrated with people who don't see the importance the way that they do, or their language is just very clear and direct. I think with all of the archetypes, it's the same thing, that these are ways of approaching the world that God has gifted each of us with. Kind of like with the soul healer, a challenge is to remember that you are not responsible for the outcome, that God has not tasked you with the outcome and the results of the work, but your job is to be faithful with that. And I think if you're able to ground yourself in your identity again in Christ as opposed to the results that you're getting, or why aren't they making the change, then you can hold it a little bit more loosely and
Right.
hold it lightly, and maybe even with a sense of humor and playfulness, which is funny because like court jesters in a way were like the prophetic critics of their time. They earned the right to say things that other people couldn't say, critiques and criticisms and things that might even get other people killed in the court, because they said it through humor and through jest and, poking fun and in ways that's like, oh yeah, you got me, and not that I'm not saying that prophetic critic artists are jesters, but I do think that is a little bit of it, of like holding it with lightness and humor to recognize not just what's wrong out there, but to have the humility to be self-reflective and spend a lot of time looking at where am I being hypocritical? How do I myself fall into these traps? Like identifying and being comfortable with our humanness also allows us to be able to speak to other people about their humanness in a way that's inviting. It's that invitational conversation that we were kind of saying earlier, so that we're doing something in a way that invites connection, invites action instead of causing damage, right?
Right.
I think artists who are prophetic critics usually are, again, if you're in a place where you're doing it well, you're really good at what you do, really good at artistry, spending a lot of time in prayer and discernment, and then really paying attention to how other people think, understanding your audience really, really well so that you know how to talk to them in a way that gets their attention, in a way that captures their heart, in a way that promotes action without alienating them and turning them off. And I would say in our culture right now, we have a plethora of people who don't care about the first part of that, who have something to say, who see what's wrong, but are maybe not as willing to take the time to really do the self-reflective work, the self-discipline work, the self-examination for self-hypocrisy, and really caring and being concerned about who you're trying to talk to, so you can talk to them in a way that, you can still get people's attention and even shock and even offend, but in a way that's going to lead to a constructive process of self-reflection or conversation and dialogue.
Yeah. I can really see like crossover with this one. And I don't just mean, I'm actually not even talking about crossover with the motivations. I mean crossover of that individual and another crossover of another archetype. So for example, I can give a good one. Can I give you a good one?
Yeah.
Maybe 10 years ago, working with your husband, Jay. And I thought, because I was coming from that soul healer place and through at that point, I felt like when I look at this, that's how I view Jay, your husband, as a prophetic critic. And so when we were working on a project together for an outreach program, which was called The Lab All Ages, the name is important. The thing is that how we were building that, we were both sort of in leadership roles, but he was coming from a very different place than I was, because as a soul healer, as our previous archetype episode, which I fall under, working with Jay to make this kind of big community thing happen would not be possible without me and without him, because he was definitely coming from that place,
right,
and looking at things that I was not looking at, but there were things that I was doing that probably at that time he was not willing to do and didn't need to do. But I was very good at that, and he was very good at this. So
right, yeah, you both have different
yeah
motivations, which then made something really successful, because you are looking at building this community for the sake of the people involved in the community, and Jay's looking at building this community for the sake of starting a movement of a different way of doing music and fostering creativity and that kind of stuff in the DC music scene. And then putting that together, you're able to like put all those pieces together, because you didn't both have to have the same gifts and motivations. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Well, I think a couple things that just going over some of these, results on the quiz too were eye-opening for me, where I saw some crossover with the soul healer, but also like, I think not having spiritual disciplines will cause this archetype to have that same thing that the soul healer has, the burnout and the depression and feeling like everything's a failure, because it maybe didn't go according to plan. And also you're working with people too, you know what I mean? And so same thing, or working through people. So same sort of thing as some of the other archetypes, but more so with the soul healer is avoiding that burnout.
Right.
And when is enough? And again, I take this archetype, this motivational archetype of how this person works is that they take things very seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But how serious?
Yeah, I think they're really good at seeing the problems. They're really good at understanding the weight of it. They can be really good at motivating and mobilizing other people in service of their cause. But then, it's easy to miss your own blind spots. And that's kind of the main challenge there, is like developing that humility and healing from past wounds and really going deep with self-knowledge so that you can avoid that burnout and depression, that you're very clear that you're not God, obviously, and you're not responsible for making all the changes. And I think that these are really, really important people in kind of the archetype toolkit for our world. And I think as church leaders, spending the time to really disciple and encourage and help these prophetic critics to develop a kind of a mature sensibility so that they can be a voice in the world is really, really important.
Yeah, and to have that impact.
Yeah, absolutely. They definitely have a special place in my heart, for sure. Well, that is our last archetype. That was a quick one, but it's been an incredible conversation, this look through all of these different motivations and the ways that reasons why artists create. And if you haven't taken the quiz yet, I definitely invite you to do that. You can go back and take the quiz. You can go back and listen to these podcasts so that you can hear all the different archetypes and find out more on our website. I hope that you really take some time to think about how God wired you and just embrace that as a good thing. And hopefully in understanding these innate desires and needs, that you're just then able to go out and take the next steps to figure out, how do I nurture and mature and support that? So how do I grow into a spiritually mature and effective prophetic critic or soul healer or mystic or maker or imaginative visionary or storyteller, whatever you are? That's the task.
And be sure to check out our website at soulmakers.org for resources, sign up for our email list, and get more information on other tools, upcoming resources, and regular updates from us.
Be sure to join us for our next conversation with Corey Frey, musician, curator, community builder, about what motivates him to create art and create community.
See you next time. Thanks for listening to Be Make Do, a Soulmakers podcast. All links and resources are located in our show notes. Want to know your artist archetype? Take the quiz at soulmakers.org/quiz.